Right, let's talk about migration. It's a word loaded with baggage, often reduced to fear-mongering headlines and political football. But behind the rhetoric are real people, making journeys fraught with challenges. And to understand those challenges, we need to talk about intersectionality. In the simplest terms, intersectionality recognizes that we're not just one thing. We're a glorious mess of identities. Gender, race, sexual orientation, you name it, all interacting and shaping our experiences. And for migrants, this interplay of identities can mean facing unique and compounded vulnerabilities. Think of it like this. Being a migrant comes with its own set of hurdles. Now add being a woman, or LGBTQ+, or belonging to a marginalized racial group. Suddenly those hurdles become a damn obstacle course. And that's what we're talking about here. Understanding how these intersecting identities create specific challenges for migrants. This isn't just some academic exercise. This is about recognizing the very real dangers and discrimination faced by millions. It's about understanding why a gay Syrian refugee might face a different set of threats than a straight one. It's about seeing how a female migrant worker from Nepal might be more vulnerable to exploitation than her male counterpart. So buckle up, because we're about to unpack this complex issue, shining a light on the often invisible struggles faced by those who dare to cross borders.
Let's be clear, the migrant journey is rarely a walk in the park. It's a grueling, often perilous trek that tests the limits of human endurance. But for women and LGBTQ+ individuals, it can be a bloody hellscape, fraught with dangers that are uniquely harrowing. Gender-based violence, discrimination, and persecution are horrifying realities they face, often made worse by their migrant status. These individuals are not just statistics, they are real people enduring unimaginable hardships.
Imagine fleeing your home country because of your sexual orientation, only to face discrimination in the very place you seek refuge. The journey is supposed to be a path to safety, but it often leads to new forms of danger. Or picture being a woman forced to rely on smugglers, knowing the risks of sexual assault are terrifyingly high. The fear is constant, and the threat is real. These aren't hypothetical scenarios, they're lived experiences for countless migrants. Their stories are a testament to the resilience and courage required to survive such ordeals.
And it's not just about physical safety. The emotional and psychological toll is equally devastating. Women often bear the brunt of caregiving responsibilities, even on the move. They are the unsung heroes, managing to care for their families under the most trying circumstances. They might be looking after children, elderly parents or sick relatives, all while navigating unfamiliar systems and languages. The challenges are multifaceted and relentless. Talk about carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. The physical and emotional burdens are immense.
LGBTQ+ migrants face their own unique set of challenges. Their journey is often marked by a constant struggle for acceptance and safety. They might be fleeing persecution in their home countries, only to encounter homophobia and transphobia in their destination countries. The cycle of discrimination seems never ending. They might be denied asylum based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, forced back into the very dangers they escaped. The system often fails those who need it most.
And let's not forget the emotional toll. The psychological scars can be deep and long-lasting. Imagine having to constantly prove your identity, your worthiness of safety and respect. The emotional labor is exhausting. Imagine the constant fear of being outed, detained, or deported. The anxiety is a constant companion. It's a level of trauma that's hard to fathom. The psychological impact can be as debilitating as the physical dangers.
The bottom line is this. Gender isn't just some abstract concept, it has real tangible effects on the migrant experience. It shapes the migrant experience in profound and often devastating ways. The intersection of gender and migration creates unique vulnerabilities. And until we acknowledge and address these gender-specific challenges, we're failing millions of people who deserve our protection and support. It's time to take action and make a difference.
Now, let's talk about work. Because for many migrants, finding a job isn't just about earning a living. It's about survival. It's about securing a future for themselves and their families, often left behind in their home countries. But the reality is that migrants are often pushed into precarious low-wage jobs, where exploitation runs rampant. These jobs are not just low-paying, they are often devoid of basic human rights and protections. Think of your typical 3D jobs: dirty, dangerous, and demanding. These are the jobs that most people avoid, but migrant workers have little choice but to accept. Those are the ones often filled by migrant workers, who are seen as cheap and disposable labor. They work long hours under harsh conditions, often without adequate rest or safety measures. And because they're often undocumented or afraid to speak up, they become easy targets for abuse. Their lack of legal status makes them vulnerable to exploitation and mistreatment. We're talking about wage theft, where employers simply refuse to pay for hours worked. This is not just an occasional oversight, it's a deliberate act of exploitation. We're talking about unsafe working conditions, where injuries are common and safety regulations are ignored. Workers are often left to fend for themselves when accidents happen. We're talking about forced labor, where people are trapped in jobs they can't leave, their passports confiscated, their movements restricted. This is modern-day slavery, hidden in plain sight. And let's not forget the domestic workers, often women who toil away in private homes, isolated and vulnerable. They are the invisible workforce, essential yet unrecognized. They cook, clean and care for others' families, often for little pay and even less respect. Their contributions are invaluable, yet they are often treated as second-class citizens. They're at increased risk of verbal, physical and even sexual abuse, trapped in a system that sees them as less than human. Their isolation makes it difficult for them to seek help or escape their situation. The problem is, existing labor laws often fail to protect migrant workers. These laws are either inadequate or poorly enforced, leaving workers without recourse. They might not be aware of their rights, or they might be too scared to report abuse, fearing deportation. The fear of being sent back to their home countries keeps them silent. And even when they do speak up, enforcement is often weak, leaving them vulnerable to retaliation. Employers can easily threaten them with job loss or worse. This is a global crisis hiding in plain sight. It's not confined to one country or region. It's a widespread issue affecting millions. Millions of people are being exploited, their labor fueling our economies while their rights are trampled upon. They contribute significantly to the economy, yet receive little in return. It's a stain on our collective conscience, and we can't afford to look away. We must take action to protect these workers and ensure their rights are respected.
Section 4. Climate Change and Crisis. Amplifying existing vulnerabilities. As if the challenges faced by migrants weren't already daunting enough, let's throw climate change and global crises into the mix. These additional layers of adversity create a perfect storm of hardship. Because here's the thing. These events don't exist in a vacuum. They interact with and intensify each other, creating a complex web of difficulties. They exacerbate existing inequalities, pushing the most vulnerable even further to the margins. Marginalized communities, already struggling to survive, find themselves facing even greater threats. Think about it. Climate change is already displacing millions of people, forcing them to flee their homes due to rising sea levels, droughts, and extreme weather events. These environmental changes are relentless and unforgiving. These climate migrants often end up in already overcrowded urban slums or in camps with limited resources, making them more susceptible to disease, exploitation, and violence. The conditions in these places are often dire, with little hope for improvement. And then there are global crises like COVID-19. The pandemic has shown us just how fragile our systems are. Remember how the pandemic exposed the fragility of our systems? It laid bare the weaknesses and gaps in our social safety nets. Well, for migrants, it was a nightmare scenario. They faced unprecedented challenges with little to no support. Border closures left them stranded, unable to return home or reach their destinations. This left many in a state of limbo, with no clear path forward. They were often excluded from social safety nets and healthcare systems, making them more vulnerable to the virus itself and its economic fallout. The lack of access to essential services only compounded their struggles. These crises act like a magnifying glass, amplifying the challenges migrants already face. They bring to light the systemic issues that have long been ignored. They highlight the inadequacy of our current systems and expose the deep inequalities that permeate our world. The disparities become impossible to ignore. It's a stark reminder that we're all interconnected, The struggles of migrants are not isolated. They affect us all. The fate of migrants is inextricably linked to our own. Their well-being is a reflection of our collective humanity. And as climate change and global crises continue to unfold, addressing the needs of migrants isn't just a matter of compassion, it's a matter of collective survival. Our future depends on how we respond to these challenges.
Section 5. Invisible Chains, Digital Rights, and the Migrant Story. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're about to enter the digital age, and it's not all sunshine and cat videos, especially for migrants. In fact, technology has created a whole new set of challenges, often infringing on their digital rights and privacy. Think about it. Migrants rely heavily on technology to stay connected with loved ones back home, access information, and navigate their new surroundings. But this reliance also makes them vulnerable to surveillance, data exploitation, and online harassment. Governments are increasingly using sophisticated technologies to track and monitor migrants, often with little transparency or oversight. We're talking about facial recognition software at border crossings, GPS tracking of asylum seekers, and data collection from phones and social media. And it's not just governments. Private companies are also cashing in on the migrant experience, collecting and selling their data without their consent. This information can then be used to target them with predatory services, discriminate against them, or even put them at risk of deportation. Imagine fleeing persecution in your home country only to have your every move tracked and your online activity monitored in your supposed safe haven. It's a chilling thought, but a reality for many. Protecting digital rights is not just about safeguarding our online activities, it's about protecting fundamental human rights. For migrants, it's about ensuring their safety, their privacy, and their freedom from persecution, both online and offline.